and be the next presenter. I also wanted to thank our sponsors, and as you can see, they're doing a lot of work. Margaret being one of them, including Margaret's training program has helped us do this. Obviously, this conference today, as you've seen, and Carolyn Jacobs also has a program in San Diego. There she is, and her lovely, handsome husband, who's been on screen and working very hard. So thank you both, and appreciate your membership as PTA board members, but this is above and beyond, and it is a sponsorship from both your parts and your programs. So everybody, if you want to go and see some wonderful training and or if you would like to join the webcasting there, they both have that available. All right, and so Margaret, and let's say also, if you have not turned in, if you did not sign in after lunch, you will have to deal with Lori. You will not get your credits unless you do that. So there you go. All right, so let's begin. Margaret, are you ready?
I have till 3:40.
Yes.
So is it already up, the slides? If I push share?
Yep. Yep. And the little one down the bottom.
This one?
No.
Oh, that one.
That one.
Got it. Okay. This is new material for me. So in my typical learning fashion, it's sort of dense and wordy. So hopefully you can keep up, or you can take the downward curve of the brownies and take a little snooze and wake up about 3:40, 3:45. Full disclosure, I am not a scientist and I'm not a physician. So I am a clinical social worker that's been fascinated by ideas over time. And these are some new ideas that I've hit and I'm trying to apply. So today I'm going to talk about two different theories of emotion and how it applies to chronic anxiety. So I'm going to try to not read the slides. So as you know, people in Bowen theory are very interested in neuroscience and try to keep up with the research there. Classic view of emotion has been the dominant view of emotion in society, and it's been applied dominantly to Bowen family systems theory, and rightfully so. Today I'm going to try to apply a different theory of emotion, as well as the classical view. This is my anxiety. What if the classical view of emotion is disproved? See? There it goes. And then Bowen theory looks archaic. There it goes. So I'm going to try to expand it to another theoretical model and see how it applies to chronic anxiety, symptom development, and homeostasis, and see what happens. And today the focus will be on theory and not on the science supporting it, or refuting it, either way. So there's 3 sections today. For those of you familiar with the constructionist view of emotion, you'll have to put up with me. I've sort of like taught myself this and the contrast as it goes forward. Then I went back and picked every reference, thankfully, to Dr. Pemberton, that Dr. Bowen referred to in his book on emotion. And then I'm going to try to apply it to the constructionist theory of emotion. Okay, so the following graph displays a variation in the theories of emotion. I wasn't aware of how many theories there were of emotion, and the names on the graph are very well respected and well-known names. The perspectives are placed on a theoretical continuum, and as the slide moves to the right, it represents increased variation that produces in the processes that alter expression of emotion. This is one of those articles There have been a few things in my life that I've read and I'm like, well, what do you know? I didn't know this. So this is one of them, and that graph made a difference to me. I think it's sort of pretty. My mother was an art teacher, so. Okay, and then the next slide, well, let me go back. You can see, you know, names on that. I don't know if you can, Damasio, Panksepp, who else is on there? They just go on and on. The list is huge. Okay, so the next slide has multiple theories, but I'm going to try to emphasize the classic and the constructionist view of emotion. The appraisal models seeing emotions as distinct states that can be combined in different ways to be switched on and off to create patterns in response to context. And on the very far right is social construction models where emotions are determined dominantly by context. But those two I'm not going to explore today. Today I'm just going to compare and contrast basic and constructionist theory of emotion. So I hope you can read this. The first column is the basic view of emotion. Are emotions unique mental states? Basic classical view says yes. The psychological construction view says no. Are emotions caused by special mechanism? One says yes, the other says no. Is each emotion caused by a specific brain circuit? Yes, no. You can see they're not the same. However, there are overlapping and areas of agreement too. So they're not polar opposites. So I'll let you read through that. Are emotions shared with non-animals? Basic would say yes. Psychological construction view would say affect is, but not emotion, because emotion is tied to language. So the perceiver would have to be able to express like anger as an emotional state, even though they could feel the affect. Anyway, that's the contrast and the similarities. So I went through this, and then what follows is I'm just going to review basic emotion theory, and then I'm going to review some of the basics about constructionist theory, and then I'm going to put them side by side. Okay, so this is the most common one. It's based on essentialism. Essentialism is a concept that are common underpinnings under phenomena, and variation is more the abnormality. It's a belief that things have a set of characteristics that make them what they are. For example, a cat would have an essence of a cat, and then that would create the cat. Darwin is the one that so famously challenged this essentialism and described the variation in species, illustrating that variation was natural and not a pathological phenomenon. However, Darwin's other book on emotion, was the expressions of emotion in man and animals, was based on essentialism. So here he has this famous book on famous research that produced the theory of evolution, adaptation, natural selection, and explained variation. And then later he wrote the book on emotion, and he went back to essentialism. I think that variation is certainly key to the theories of emotion. So he supported both classical and constructionist theory of emotion. And it's sort of repetitive there. Essentialism drove exploring the brain for different sources of emotion. For example, theorizing that fear was held in the amygdala. Emotion has a pattern, a specific network across the brain, and that each emotion has a footprint that was identifiable by brain activation and facial expression. Thinking would be top-down, as the brain is seen as building blocks wrapped in the higher functioning neocortex. These are separate and independent abilities, and systems in the brain are distinct. This theory states the brain is reactive and generates emotion. And these concepts are big, and they can drive clinical application, research, judicial systems, you know, if somebody's face shows remorse or not. Perhaps internet facial recognition. Okay, so now I'm going to do a very brief review of the constructionist theory of emotion. So this theory states that the brain creates whole brain states with no activation unique to emotional category or signature. There's not an emotional, social, or cognitive brain. Core systems are combined differently for each situation, and there's no consistent marker for emotion or a signature or footprint. There's variation, for example, in anger. Not all anger would be the same. They're not building blocks, but construction from general processes. Emotion's an emergent quality with parts of the brain contributing. And each part of the brain does a variety of functions that are able to shift brain states. Not all parts are necessary, but the sum is greater than the whole. Is that right? I might have reversed it. Anyway, sum is greater than the parts. The brain is constantly active, not still, and then not reacting, but making predictions or best guesses that generate emotions. So there's not an emotional network that produces a specific facial expression. The thinking network is therefore not a separate network. Emotion is part of every brain state. And that the brain is predictive, and the predictions are what generate the emotions. Okay, so if the brain lives in this dark closet of a skull and it's receiving input, and the memory comes up like, what is this like? What have I had before that's like this? And it's trying to make a meaning out of what it's experiencing. And there are different brain states, and then as the brain shifts, it's focused from the world to the body to the past. And these are the three primary areas that the brain is receiving information on to generate a meaning. So the ease of information that passes through brain states or not, the flexibility of a brain, you know, sometimes I'll be thinking to the left and then all of a sudden my mouth opens up and I've gone to the right. I mean, like, really? I was thinking I was going this way. So the ability of the brain to change states and the ease or not that it can change states, which implies how easily or not people can learn. So there's this range of homeostasis and a variation in flexibility. And as the brain creates predictions, errors come up. And then how easily can you predict, can you correct an error or not? And this affects, again, the homeostasis that would follow, adaptability, flexibility, and is a form of learning. Okay, this is really interesting to me, and I'll pick this up at the end if I have time. I may not have time. So emotions are a construction of your total body in the world. Sometimes I wonder when it's the mind-body connection, how come it's not the body-mind connection? Because I've never, like all the years I worked in the hospital, I never met a happy sick person. I just never met one. And I'm like, well, you don't feel good. How can you be happy when you don't feel good? So the fluid brain can go in different directions, and granularity and correcting predictions are the key to changing one's mind. So mental states, again, are not the process that generates, are not the content, it's not what generates the emotion, it's all situational and situationally dependent. So that's a very different theory. When Dr. Feldman Barrett was here, it was like, oh my God, this is really different. I can't quite get my head around it. So no difference between emotional generation and emotional regulation. No difference between emotional state and experience and perception. Experience is the perception. What is different is that the predictions created and the concepts gained. So Instead of trying to manage this one over here, you can create a different perspective over here, and then the different perspective creates a different emotion. So instead of my heart rate being up and that being a horrible thing, and needing some Ben & Jerry's immediately, I'm thinking, well, I'm just getting ready to run a little race here and for the next 40, 45 minutes, and it's a good thing because I'm like on, so you better get ready to go. Okay, so these are core differences in the science of emotion, not in the theory. I'm interested in how they both apply to Bowen family systems theory. So here again, I'm trying to contrast it. Look, the column on the right has the constructionist column, the green. So the limbic systems are the classical view, or reactive, and emotions are reactive to the world. In the constructionist view, the limbic regions would be predictive, and emotions are constructions of your world. Again, I got the, anyway, the green goes the constructionist on the right. Learning is using, on the classical view, learning is using intellectual systems, and behavior is guided by the ability to differentiate between emotion and thinking. And the constructionist learning is correcting prediction errors. And behavior is guided by the use of concepts to categorize experiences, which guides action and constructs experience. Classical view, motion has a fingerprint, separate and independent building blocks. Constructionist view, emotion is a category created by categorizing physical changes with emotional concepts, created by previous experiences, unless there's a reason to correct them. So here's the memory, previous experiences coming up. General processes generated from core systems with high variability. It's not a separate system for emotion or thinking. Anger, for example, is not the same circuit over and over. Emotion is an emergent quality that varies with context, predictions, and physiology. So no action or face is specific to an emotion category. The amygdala being the seat of fear, it supports fear learning. Freezing equals fear would be more classical. Constructionists would think of the amygdala nuclei playing a role in the threat. Certain nuclei. Threat can be felt without the amygdala. There's some famous cases of people with impairments that don't have the amygdala. And the amygdala has different multiple functions. Freezing is one form of fear, but there's lots of responses to fear. So facial expressions for classical view equals a feeling, and constructionist view, the context is crucial for reading facial expressions. And if you add the body to it, so if I'm making a frowny face, then you can see this, right? And so you might think, well, she's really mad. But if you see a frowny face and I'm doing this, then you think, oh, well, she's sick. So the body with the constructionist would override the face. Again, it's different. Integration is learning from and correcting prediction errors, which create new concepts. They both think natural selection prefers complexity and flexibility within the brain. Both theories are based on evolution. Constructionists would think of generating different concepts, using world observations, body feelings in the past to generate emotions and perspectives. And the generation itself cannot be regulated, but you can create a new one that creates a different emotional state. So, okay, that's 101 difference between the theories. So what's this got to do with the price of milk? So I just went through, in the poor trainees, I mean, I spent one whole one whole day on all the quotes from Dr. Bowen and trying to decide whether they were constructionist or classic view of emotion. This quote, I think, is constructionist. This quote would be classic. Thank God for the index. This is classic. So there's actually both in the book. Classic view is dominant, as it has been in society, as it should have been when he wrote it. I just wanted to go back and see if there was any other thinking that would be from a different theory. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. So I wanted to know, do different theories of emotion pertain to Bowen family systems theory? Okay, this has been probably the most fun for me. It's sort of wild, exploratory thinking. It's I like to be on the edge of things and try new things. This is new to me. Not obviously, this theory has been around for a long time and predates me by centuries. So I'm certainly not new, but for me it was new. So this is how emotion is created. This is a long quote, but I liked it, so if you can tolerate it. You can see how it's tied to allostasis. Okay, and then the brain constructs meaning, the italicization, it's mine. The brain constructs meaning by correctly anticipating, predicting incoming sensations, and sensations are then categories into action in a situated way, and therefore meaningful based on past experience. When past experiences of emotion are used to categorize the predicted sensory array and guide action, then one experiences and perceives the emotion, such as happiness. In other words, an instance of emotion is constructed the same way all perceptions in the brain are constructed, using the same well-validated neuroanatomical principles of information flow in the brain. And then these concepts contribute to allostasis. Oh, I know what that is. That's a helicopter. Oh, I know what that is. My mother does that a lot. That's familiar to me. Oh, well, she'll get used to it. So all new learning is concept learning, which helps the brain make a summary and leads to a whole brain state that generates the emotion. This is constantly adjusting and moving. I think the pictures, I don't really understand all the colored pictures of the brain, but I think they're beautiful. Watching this, try to regulate this, and then you can just almost see them get in sync and connect. Prediction error is processing is akin to concept learning. These are learning signals and adjust subsequent predictions, or not. So giving meaning is context dependent and contingent on past history of interactions. So it's necessary to map individual and situational patterning of facial movements and the use of emotion concept, which is created by the perceiver. So with Bowen family systems theory, the context of the family and important other working relationships is the brain in context. So according to this theory, emotion is generated by drawing from past experiences and applying it to the present. Drawing from the past could reasonably propel predictions of threat. Oh, here he comes again. Discord, happiness, into today, despite the context being different. So this disturbance of it not matching current reality, theoretically, in my mind, could be a generation of chronic anxiety. As you know, chronic anxiety is a core concept in Bowen family systems theory that accounts for variation in the functioning of the individuals within families. Could the variation in flexibility and capacity to adapt be determined by predictions and the degree of prediction errors? Could those who have fewer prediction errors and better capacity to learn generate less anxiety? More prediction errors, more chronic anxiety, less prediction errors, less chronic anxiety. Focus on the retrieval system of current interaction for current interactions could propel forward past predictions, this anticipation about interactions. It could create the remembered past in the present. Uh-oh, is he going to get mad again? That would be a prediction. I may not say that she'll get mad at me. That's a prediction. This seems especially pertinent to families and their history of interactions. Could this lead to variation in levels of chronic anxiety over generations and prolonged duress in some lines of the family? Perhaps the prediction errors that are not processed and reduced create disruptions, incongruities that challenge allostasis in future generations. Is this a way that it's carried forward multi-generationally? This disconnect could produce continuous anxiety over time due to the rub with reality and set off a cascade of stress responses. This is just Margaret Otto thinking about this. So, is it possible that the past carried forward through memory reflects unresolved emotional attachment to the family of origin? No. So can't quite get this on the slide, but does the scale represent, I've tried to represent the scale of differentiation. Could it represent how easily or not the brain state changes? How easily can prediction errors be corrected? Are those lower in the scale stuck in the past in a way? Accurate predictions, the ability to learn quickly through sensitizing prediction errors would reduce stress. New concepts, a different mental state and actions would be created by correcting errors. Mental states cannot be acted upon themselves, but a different state can be generated. Old mental states would not be activated. So the number of errors and the repetition create dysregulation. Errors not corrected could lead to inflammation, stress, and symptoms due to the lack of effective adaptation. More and more of the same. This is a whole brain phenomena in contact. Anybody met a happy sick person? I thought I took this slide out, but if chemical information is not passed easily between brain states, perhaps immaturity may be perpetuated. It could be difficult for an individual to learn in a new context. For example, an adult child could still believe his mother is going to be responsible for him and finds it difficult to make a different prediction. In a way, he could be stuck in the past. What? You're not going to pay for that again? So is it possible that the lack of integration between the mind and relationship context produce relationship disturbances? Could this lead to vulnerability and symptom development? And how often does the past live again in the present? Now I'm going to go into a few clinical examples. and then I'll be close to wrapping it up. So a mother recently predicted that her son always drank when she was out of town, and that she couldn't leave because he would then go on a bender. This was her previous prediction that regenerated to her as a truth, that when her son drank problematically. However, after some discussion and detailed history review, which would be called granulation in the constructionist theory of emotion, it became clear that sometimes he drank when she was in town, and sometimes she drank when he was out of town. And this prediction, she just started laughing, just really didn't apply, because he drank because of him and not because of her. She was able then to regenerate a perception that her son's drinking was not dependent on her presence, and she didn't really need to not leave town so that he would not drink. This was just one piece of therapy. I don't want to make this as a cause, but it was a different way of thinking about emotion in the brain. Here was another one. You're just like your father. So this global prediction without any granularity just slapped onto an individual, can this mother make a different prediction that has more details and differentiation in it? Perhaps the prediction could be corrected. For example, this mother believed her son was only safe when she was monitoring, he has a chronic illness, and when she was monitoring his physical and emotional condition. However, when she got into the details of it, she realized that she was at work all day. She often went and he was home, and she went to bed at 10:30 and he was up all night, and she really wasn't babysitting, quote unquote, the 20-year-old. So this loosened a little bit the grip of fusion between them. This is a son to the mother. Surely you will pay for more college. This is after, I think, 6 semesters of flunking out. Strongly stated and adamant that she would. After many trials, the young adult has come to make a different prediction on his mother's words. He's now saying she's probably not going to pay for college, and I think I should probably get a job soon. So it's slow learning, but to me these are examples where you can see a different theory of emotion in the clinical work. This is just a little track I've been on, so I'll just mention this. This is the past predicting the present, searching for previous experiences to understand what's in the present, and the focus on the environment, the world, and obviously regulating the body, the blood pressure, etc. So I was just thinking about this with Bowen family systems theory. So is the body the emotional system in constructionist theory? Is the feeling system the past in constructionist theory? And is the intellectual system the ability to focus and learn on the world? I do not know the answers to these questions. So instead of focusing on the difference between feeling and thinking, constructionist theory would focus on observation also, granularity, and whole brain state variation in order to reduce chronic arousal. Would be a mind capable of observing itself and change its inaccurate predictions by creating a new prediction that adapts to the current context. Effective adaptation would reduce stress. Instead of battling between thinking and emotional systems, which would be the classical view, perhaps it's a struggle to shift automatic whole brain states previously out of awareness, correct those predictions, and granulate the experiences. This would allow for more effective adaptations in the present, which would then propel into the future. Instead of working on emotional reactivity and regulation, the focus would be on generating a different prediction that would create a new brain state and emotion. Focus on observations, the worldview, and granularity could increase adaptation and allostasis. So obviously, Bowen family systems theory is much broader than an individual theory of emotion. I do not really have a horse in the race. I don't care which theory of emotion ends up with the most scientific, to be most scientifically accurate, but it's been great fun to try to apply a different theory of emotion and see how it would apply to Bowen family systems theory. Does not address birth order, family's emotional unit, society emotional process, triangles, cutoffs. But other concepts seem quite pertinent, such as the multi-generational transmission process, nuclear family emotional process, chronic anxiety, and differentiation. So the concept of chronic anxiety and symptom development appears to have substantial backing from the constructionist view of emotion. It delineates how the brain responds in the present from past experiences and predictions. These then contribute to the chronic nature of anxiety that would lead to symptom development. The past is living in the present. The same prediction which generates emotion from the past repeats unless unlearned. Chronic stress ensues with the disparity with the present. So time will tell. Like all individual theories, constructionist theory does not address all concepts, but might lend a hand to some of the primary concepts, such as chronic anxiety, and has a theoretical components to understand symptom development. Again, I have no idea where the science will come out. I do think that the neuroscience will look radically different in 50 years than it does now, and the tenets of Bowen family systems theory will hold with very different underpinnings from science. And that's it, folks. Huh. Right on time.
Set up the panel.
Could read, and now.